All right, we are really excited to have on this 10 questions YouTube series Brian Keane from Prodigy Hockey. He's an NHL skill development coach, works with a lot of not only high level hockey players, but youth hockey players as well. So awesome to get his perspective on a lot of different things. How you doing, Cater?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. All right, you ready? Let's just jump right into it.
Let's do it.
All right, question one. Here we go. I want to know, who was your biggest influence as a kid growing up, and what were some things that you learned from whoever that person was that you kind of take with you even in your coaching journey today?
Definitely my parents and just how they interact with people, how they treat people. I really feel like, looking back, some of the soft skills that either, they taught me directly or I kind of just picked up by watching them, certainly helps me in my day-to-day life and then in coaching as well.
That's cool, man. I ask you a hockey question, it seems like, and you go to the soft skill stuff. That's like right up my alley. So, like, what are some things in terms of like what you call the soft skills that they were really good at that you try and implement with what you're doing?
Well, my parents worked for the DDSO of New York State, so they worked with people with mental handicaps, disabilities. So they had an amazing patience and love for these people. So I would go and be able to see them interact in their workplace, and not only how they interacted with those people, but they were leaders and within their groups. So how they also led the people, the employees as well. And talking about soft skills, just feel for the room, feel for the people they're interacting with, and how best to motivate somebody, or put your arm around somebody who's having a tough day, right? So they just seem to have a really good understanding of kind of you know how to interact with people, and I certainly feel like I picked up some of those instincts in using my coaching, kind of feeling, how is this going today with this player? When's the right time to interact with that player to provide feedback or, lay off? I definitely feel like I picked it up from my parents.
It's amazing how much you can learn from the special needs community, isn't it? I have family members in the special needs community, and it's I do a lot of work there, and dude, it's just like the best community ever. You learn so much, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
certainly do.
yeah, and it's funny too. I mean, so much of coaching is not hockey. That's the
Yeah.
thing that I feel like so much. We talk so much about hockey, and you want to get better from a hockey standpoint. You watch video, and you talk to people about certain things that they're doing. But I mean, I feel like that's only half the battle if you're not getting better from like a teaching or a
Hmm.
leadership perspective. Like, are you really growing that much, right?
Yeah. It's a relationship business. It's a relationship situation. So if you can't build relationships with people, and you know, it's so much more than the coaching and the technical and tactical.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, actually, that's the next question I have for you. That's a nice little segue. Thank you very much. Question
Perfect.
two. So you talk about the technical versus the tactical instruction, and I think that's one that's kind of hits home for you, and you've done a lot of research on, and I've
Mhm.
heard you speak a lot on the merits and benefits of the technical versus the tactical. So when you're talking to youth coaches or even higher level coaches that are doing some skills with their players, how much benefit do you give to one over the other, and how do you balance the two?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the player in front of you and what their needs are. But I think having, and going back to question one, a nice, interaction of social, psych, technical, and tactical education for the player, and specifically technical and tactical. I mean, both of them are crucial all the way up, but I think just how much time you spend on one or the other is certainly going to depend on your team and the talent level or the ability of that group that you have in front of you. And you know how you define it is important too. But like the technical abilities of players, the way I just define it is, that's how they might do something, but the skill is being able to apply it in the game context, and then within the tactical, how the team or you know power play or whatever situation you're in, how you're going to try to define that or use those skills in those moments.
Yeah. Do a lot of times when you're working with players, you kind of start with the technical and then build a little bit more towards the tactical, or is that again just kind of like a person by person, case by case scenario?
It's person by person, case by case, and like how many people are on the ice with me and what the situation might be. Um, but ultimately, like, yeah, we're trying to, show them different techniques or put them in situations where we're not maybe giving them the answer or the technique to use, but um, trying to get them to identify what's going to be the right move and solution for them in that moment. And then within how we design it is going to, produce or let some of these things emerge.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And it's interesting when you talked about tactical and not necessarily giving them the answers to things. Tactical, I feel like there's a dichotomy between kind of like rigid system structure, do it this way tactical,
Yeah.
and allowing them to have the freedom to make decisions tactical. How do you kind of balance the two of those? Let's say you have four guys on the ice.
Hmm.
Question number one. And then let's say you're a coach of a team
Hmm.
and you're trying to figure that out from a team standpoint too. How would you go about answering that?
Well, certainly, like if the players never had any interaction with the tactic, like I can't just expect they're going to be able to do it,
Yeah.
right? But by setting up certain scenarios, some of it the game might produce based on where the D are, what kind of pressure, what's available. Some of these things might emerge from those interactions. But depending on the player's knowledge base, if I have a group of four peewees, like they're probably not going to know a lot of the tactics, so they haven't had any experience with them. Maybe they haven't, maybe they've done some of it, but they haven't declared it. They couldn't like talk to me about it.
Yeah.
With a group of pro players, they've have a vast knowledge of the game and have a lot of interactions and have played thousands of games, potentially, right? So they're going to have a much more better understanding of what could work, right? What tactics are in their arsenal, or within stuff they've done with different teams at the college, or junior or youth level. So that is their history coming in is going to, really set up, okay, like what are we going to talk about, and then how are we going to set this up to try to have some of these things show up in these little, yeah, whether it's a small area game or even just, um, an even more isolated drill.
Yeah. So it sounds like even your conversations with players, even maybe even before you start working with them, just in trying to figure out where they are on
Yeah.
their spectrum of hockey sense and
Yep.
how the way that they process the game and stuff, is that something that's really important for you? It's probably even more so like when you get to the more elite type players.
Yeah. Well, we do some stuff where we ask players to, look at a clip and then like tell us what are some of the things that could happen next.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see, like, the and it's not surprising, but it's also just, we maybe don't give enough credit for how great the hockey sense is of like junior players, college players, and pro players. But the younger you go, like they just don't have that situational knowledge. So getting an understanding of what kind of situational knowledge they have is then going to allow us to be like, okay, now we can tap into techniques or tactics or whatever. We're going to have a better sense of where we need to start, I guess.
That's cool. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this rabbit hole. I'm really interested in this right now. So you have a guy, like, let's say you're doing that, you're giving them a quiz, not necessarily a quiz, but you do a lot of really cool ones.
Yeah, yeah, we do quiz too. Yeah,
Yeah. So you give a player what's going to happen next in this scenario. What are you seeing? And that
yeah,
player, when they're watching video and there's no pressure or no big 6'5" defenseman coming
yeah,
down to
yeah,
try and take their head off, and they're able to answer it correctly,
yeah,
and they're really good. Maybe they go 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Then when they get to the ice
yeah.
and they have to actually execute on that play that you were talking about on the video, do you feel like the players that are able to see it and recognize it in video are able to translate that from a skill standpoint and from an execution standpoint on the ice more than the people that don't really understand it when they're watching the video?
Not necessarily. No. Yeah, it's such a different.
So different, right?
Yeah, yeah. But it does at least give us an idea of like what they know and they're have some knowledge around. And even though they might not be able to execute it in the heat of in the pressure of a game, um, that's still a good step in the right direction. Or we need to take a step back and be like, well, what problems are you solving in this situation? Like, so if you don't understand like what you're dealing with, then it's going to be harder for you in the moment in a game, without even thinking really, with letting being kind of hopefully in a flow state and reading and seeing and taking advantage of what's available. If you don't know what you're dealing with consistently, then you're probably not going to be able to manipulate it as well as you'd like.
Yeah, yeah, cool. All right, well, question two led to about 6 questions for question two. So the two A, B, C, and D. All right, so question three. I know you watch a lot of video, and
Yeah.
you are a very, very big student of the game. What are like one or two of the things that you're really trying to study and figure out right now that can help the players that you work with?
Yeah, I think it goes into what we were just talking about. I really, and it's probably been like a 5-year journey for me, and it's going to continue hopefully for as long as they allow me to coach. Um, how can we help players learn motor skills, techniques that can be applied in the game? Um, what is the best way to do that? And then to your point earlier, like, yeah, it's one thing to be doing it in practice, and how can we create practice environments and designs that allow for some of the same sort of pressures and things you're going to have to deal with in the game, so that these techniques and the skills can transfer into you know an NHL game. And we're lucky we've had success with some of it, but I think there's just like so much of this is untapped, and other sports and other um, uh, other coaches and other realms really are far along on this. And it's fun to kind of see what research is out there, as well as what other coaches and other sports are doing also.
So, what are some cool things that you might be seeing on the topic from some of the research you've done on other sports?
Well, I think, and this is something that USA Hockey is trying to promote. I think you see an adoption of the CLA in a much bigger way.
What's that?
um, the constraint sled approach,
Okay.
and that's kind of underpinned by ecological dynamics and dynamical systems theory. Big words.
Can you dumb that down for for everybody else?
Yeah,
Constraints, learning, and just
I'll
maybe
do my
explain it a little
best.
bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. For everybody, I know what you're talking about. Obviously.
yeah. uh, Basically, this is. I gotta. Hopefully, I do a good job here. You can let me know after. So the constraint sled approach is basically the interaction of the environment, which would be the rink, and then some of like the cultural pressures maybe we deal with, parents, coaches, how the players interacting with that environment, and then the task that they're trying to complete. So what the CLA promotes is that kind of interaction between the environment that you're in, so culture, the the ice you're skating on, the task that you're trying to complete, you're going to get a retrieval. Like a Swedish player or a Finnish player might have a different environment that they're learning how to do those things in. So how they complete that task might be a little bit different than me as a US player, coming from Rochester, New York.
Interesting.
So these movements and skills are emergent based on that interaction.
So, what type of environment then would be best for kids to be able to flourish in?
Great question. So, today there, so where, and this is another branch off, and we've talked about this a little bit, Jean Cote's work in like longitudinal studies
Yep.
around, where do elite players come from, or pro players, or people that excel in sport. and it's usually from areas smaller, I don't want to, misquote the research. You're gonna have to, do some homework yourself and look at it just to make sure I'm not confusing any of it. But basically, most of the top athletes don't come from like cities. They come from small towns. They come from areas that where there's maybe not as much pressure. There's a lot of opportunity for play, so that you can try these things, and that's where that environment piece is so important. That you have, especially from like 6 to 13, you have an opportunity at some point to just try things without the pressures of parents, coaches, your organization, and players that seem to invest in a lot of that extra work at home or with buddies, which hopefully isn't work, it's just fun.
Yeah.
They seem to be able to pick up and have like a nice range of different sporting experiences. They end up being the better players long term, as opposed to maybe a player that at 6 is already on the fast track, and has a lot of pressure on them from a very early age, and where it's maybe doesn't give you the feel that you can try things, because if you don't win, then there's going to be consequences, or there's it might not be because you don't win, but because you didn't score, you didn't do something that it was expected of you. So
Yeah.
the longer we can delay that, I think that pressure on a young person that probably certainly isn't psychologically ready for that, the better.
Interesting. So what are some things that so I am a hockey director now, of a AAA organization. And when you talk about AAA, I feel like a lot of that can be construed as like being way too serious, way too early. Like AAA
Yep.
is when we played, you started at Pee Wee Major,
Yeah.
and it's down to like mites now. You have like these all-star teams at mite. So as a hockey director, what can I do, and what can other hockey directors do to try and foster that kind of environment and culture? Even from the earliest type of ages, when, quote unquote, you're a AAA organization, and your expectations from the parents is to be, we're paying more money for this, it should be more serious type thing.
Well, that's some of the environmental constraints, which unfortunately, are probably more deeply ingrained in our culture than we'd like to admit, maybe,
Yeah.
that are probably harder to change at this point. In Sweden or Finland, it might be, again, I can't speak, I don't live there. I've never been to either country. So, but they've been able to do that. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing, socially more accepted. And there's just more of an understanding that young people, need like winning and losing games. They're not as at a younger age. That shouldn't really be the focus as much as, are you winning as far as helping kids develop their love for the game, develop their skills and game understanding, and a lot of that failure, on the, high level might lead to a game loss, but they're learning from those interactions versus us kind of, pushing, you know, uh, forcing kids to make decisions that we want them to make. That's not really learning.
Yeah.
You need to fail to in most cases, to learn from situations you're in. So if you're not, so I guess my practical advice, and I dealt with it with squirts and peewees at, I was coaching, um, head coach of a team, and it was a great experience, but it is about like, explaining to the parents some of this stuff, and explaining them how people learn, and specifically how people learn motor skills, and showing the game plan. If there's no game plan, I think it's hard to sell to a parent that, oh yeah, we're going to, probably we might not win these games, but just trust me. So you got to show them, hey, like, this is what we're doing. This is what I'm trying to accomplish with your kids. I want them to love hockey, number one. So if we're in a situation where that's being compromised, then that's an issue. I want them to try things and feel comfortable to mess up. What still happens though is that our culture still kind of, suffocates certain kids. And even I dealt with it, kids feeling pressure, like, when we play a local team, like, and that would get them out of just trying to play and learn and compete. All the kids want to compete and win. That's
Yeah.
not the, that's certainly not the issue, but you're not going to be able to compete at your highest level if you're, worried about the outcomes, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. And there's a lot of studies being done about that, huh? Like how the environment can affect even what you do from a motor
Yeah.
standpoint. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's all, and again, I wish I could off the top of my head. I'll grab some of the other. I know the Bundesliga, which is the German soccer league, has done some longitudinal studies. There's a lot of stuff out there. So
Sure. Yeah. Maybe we can link it to the page or something like that
yeah.
afterwards. Very, very cool. All right. Let's move on. Question 4, which is actually probably question like 16 by now. But question 4 I have for you, again, you love to study, you love to learn about players and certain things that individual players do to make them successful. Who have been, let's say, 2 of your favorite players to sit down and watch video on and feel like you as a coach have really learned a lot from their games? I'm putting you right on the spot here because I know there's like probably 17,000 that you're thinking of in your head right now.
Yeah, I think you can learn. I think especially at the highest levels, everyone has unique attributes that make them, who they are. Um, you know, Kaner, of course, is certainly up there. I've learned so much from watching him play. I mean, and some
What
of
are a
I'm
couple
not
things
gonna
that
get to,
he does just way better than everybody else?
yeah. I mean, he's I mean, his awareness and ability to to manipulate and uh, grab attention of a number of players at once. Like I mean, that's just one. There's so many things I've learned from him, and um, he's certainly up there. And what's it? Probably another guy. And just so I can not pick another forward, because then everyone's going to probably give me a hard time if they watch this. Everyone thinks I'm more focused on the forwards, but Roman Yossi is someone that I really have learned a lot from. Someone I really enjoy watching. Defend as from a defensive standpoint, and then certainly offensively, he's dynamic and just kind of the reads he makes um, away from the. He's incredible in those areas.
Cool. Okay, cool. Question number 5. We have, in your opinion, what sets like the truly elite players apart from the rest of the pack? So you talk about your top 2% of the players. Let's even break it down even further. First, let's talk about the players like in the NHL. So the best players in the world, the Crosbys, McDavids, the Yossi's, the people the Caners that you're talking about. And then after that, like what for the younger kids, maybe
Mm-hmm.
from peewees to midgets that you've worked with, what do you think sets apart the top 1 to 2%?
They love the game.
You just trying to suck up to me right now? Just kidding.
They love the game. They love improving. They have a lot of experiences where they've failed and improved from it. They're self-reflective. Um, Certainly, the hockey IQ is. If you're in the NHL, maybe besides a small percentage, like you have made, very, very, very high IQ. I think you can't get away from. It's hard to hide if you don't have good IQ at the highest levels.
Yeah.
And then, like at the younger ages, I think it's like, how much do you enjoy doing it? Do you enjoy the process? And a lot of that is built around your environment and who you have in your corner. I think it's not just I've loved hockey since I was 4.5, 5 years old watching the Mighty Ducks. So like that came into my world, and it's just something I've loved since that moment, basically. There's certainly been bumps in the road and there's different things that come up, but you got to love what you're doing, because then that's going to, when these road bumps come up or whatever, you're going to be able to, um, work through it. But yeah, I think just like hockey specifically, beyond like your your personality and who you are and what you love, like hockey IQ is crucial.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, it's I even think about it like being a college recruiter, and that competitiveness slash passion, love for the game and hockey sense is like everything else is it's almost secondary when
Yeah.
you're looking for players that you want to be a part of your organization, because it's right, like if you have the passion for it and you really love it, doesn't matter the external forces that come your way, you're going
Hmm.
to want to work through it. You're going to continue
Yeah.
to just try and battle through or figure out a way to make it better. And that's what this game is all about. It's about improvement.
Yeah.
And even you talking about some of the best players, and one of the things that you said, what sets them apart is they're self-reflective, and
Yeah.
they're like hockey nerds. They love the game. and
Yeah.
and it's interesting, even from our previous conversation about the environment, how important that environment is at even such a young age. Like you talked about,
Yeah.
4.5 is when you fell in love with it. It was probably right around the time that I did too.
Yeah.
And for most kids, it's probably that maybe 5 to 10 year old range. Like how
Yeah.
important is that environment at that age when you're talking about, and it's not even necessarily like the what that you're doing in terms of like the hockey skills and all that. It's just like
Yeah.
that's so secondary.
Yeah.
You gotta love it.
Yeah.
Because how much legitimately can you get better from like a hockey standpoint at those ages? Probably a bit, but the passion thing is, it's got to be everything.
Yeah. I think, and it's really hard today because you have um, so many opportunities to skate, so many tournaments, and so many things. And that's not my place to tell anyone what to do. But I think if we can get the kids to, when it becomes August or September, whenever your season starts, if they're excited about going back to the rink, that's what you should be trying to foster. So that usually means some time off at some point. You know, uh, like I remember, I played a lot of different sports, but when it was like September, or I forget when we would even start the season, but I was pumped for
Right?
that first practice. I was fired up. Yeah.
Getting your
Oh
game
yeah.
jerseys and your socks and like meeting for that first practice and getting on the ice
Oh
for the
yeah.
first time. Oh
That
man.
was pure joy. That was fun.
I love that. It's like making me be nostalgic right now. I like it.
And I
Um,
think Toph, if you don't mind, I'll add one more
yeah, yeah,
thing to that. Now that I'm thinking, like at the like NHL level too, guys that are self-reflective, but also have this like confidence and trust in their abilities, and are focused more on solving the game versus like just solving themselves. Because the moment we have a bad stretch of games or things aren't going well, it's easy to kind of internalize and be like, man, my hands aren't good, my feet, whatever. The best of the best seem to be able to um, you know, trust in their skill set and their abilities, and really focus on solving the game and winning, you know, shifts and being able to kind of focus in on the right things, it
yeah,
seems.
yeah. And then work to do them too. I would imagine that those people, like, it's not just about self-reflection, but it's
Yeah.
about self-reflection, recognizing what it's going to take to get better at whatever it is they need to get better at, and then actually putting a plan together, maybe with you, maybe their coaches, to
Yeah.
actually do the work necessary to get better too. Because that's a huge piece of it, I feel like.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, okay, let's move on. Next question. Uh, Number 6. So describe what it's like working with NHL players. There's a lot of people out there that are looking to get into kind of like the skill development, hockey IQ development game, and try and really help people what's it like in the environment working with the best of the best, and how has that made you a better coach?
Yeah, it's certainly pushed me to you know, study more than I ever have. And when you see guys like that I'm lucky to work with always wanting more and when I say more, like to get better, to learn more, to it's very inspiring. So it's learning from their kind of the way they manage themselves and how they've improved is certainly something I'm very grateful for. But if you aren't prepared and you aren't doing that work, certainly they're they take it very seriously, and they want that hour or hour and a half we're out there together to be, we're getting stuff done. So the attention to detail and um, you know the work prior is crucial.
Yeah, so they kind of force you to be a better coach. Just you have to be prepared. You have to be giving feedback during. So it's like the before and the during, and probably even the after is like
Yeah,
you have to be on, huh?
yeah, we're especially in the summer, it's a big commitment. And we're lucky we work with quite a few guys now, and it's been a great thing for us. But it's a huge commitment to be able to give as much as possible to each of them.
Yeah, I like that. That's awesome. And how much of like your job as a development coach is the interaction between player and coach, and like learning what they're thinking and learning kind of where their mind is going in certain situations and stuff, because you do your research and you do your work and you're very prepared and everything, but I have to imagine that sometimes when you're working with the players, you just like stuff that you've been working on for forever, like they bring something to you and then now you have to think about it in like a completely different way. Does that happen quite a
Oh
bit?
yeah, yeah, certainly. They're constant, and that's why it's fun because it's we're working together. It's not like I'm the dictator on the ice saying you're going to do it this way or the highway. It's a we're 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 teaming up. We're working together to help them, you know, uh, be prepared in season or add things in the off season to be have a great year. So it's a collaboration certainly.
That's cool. I love that. Okay, question number 7. How much can you teach and how much do you teach mindset? So not necessarily like the technical or the tactical of like what
Mhm.
you're doing, but like the how and almost the attitude and demeanor that you have while you're trying to execute on certain things.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to kind of what I talked about with your thinking about my parents. You know, especially with youth players, and it also with now that I'm getting older, some of the pros, right? It's how you carry yourself and how you interact with them and people that they see me or whoever interacting with, and my how I prepare and how what I bring is going to they're seeing that, they're picking it up, whether they're thinking about it or implicitly seeing that. And I think that's kind of how culture and how people pick up, ways of behaving. I don't know if it's certainly. I like to be able to like write down, 8 things for if I'm coaching a team that this is how we want to behave and act, and these are kind of the things that are non-negotiable.
Right.
But ultimately, you can write down anything you want if you're not doing it and you're not leading by example. Especially with like really young kids, they pick up every little thing you do. It's it's crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
I've always been a big
so
believer that teams take on the personality of their coach. Like
yeah,
it's just in everything that they do. That's why I think as a coach, it's so important, the balance between challenging and fun for a
yeah,
coach is so hard, but I
yeah,
almost think it's like the most important job that you can have, because as a coach, you know, there's times where you need to drive. There's times where
Yeah.
you need to, push and prod and get kids outside their comfort zone, because that's where the growth happens. But at the same time,
Yeah.
it has to be, like we talked about, in an environment where the kids feel safe, the kids feel like they're
Yeah.
having fun, and the best coaches are able to find that balance. And maybe for some it's
Yeah.
different, where it's like, they're, as their personality, they're kind of like a 70% driver and the 30%
Yeah.
fun guy. And maybe there's others
Yeah.
that are the complete opposite, but they can both be extremely effective in what they do. And that's a very difficult but so important thing as a coach, because the kids are going to take that on from whatever vibe you're giving off.
Yeah. And that's that feel, right?
Yeah.
That's not maybe something a coach can articulate, but they've had experiences over time. They've built up instincts where it's like, okay, I feel like, today might be a day I need to lean on this guy, and however however they may do that. Or I need to, today needs to be in a fun and engaging experience because we've been driving them. We've been driving them into the ice for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I feel like that's one thing that gets a little bit misconstrued, because, you know, I think hockey's become, we've even talked about this, hockey's become so serious at such a young age that people
Yeah.
like you and I and USA Hockey, we talk so much about like, hey, let's take a step back here. It's supposed to be fun. And we talk
Yeah.
about that stuff a lot because we're pushing against the grain that
Yeah.
has made things so serious. But sometimes it gets misconstrued, whereas like we don't really appreciate how important it is to really be tough, and
Yeah.
push and drive, because we have to do that too. So it's that balance. And I think I need to do a better job of talking about that more,
Mhm.
in the right way than, the other side of making it fun in the environment, because that's ultimately really important too. And because that's
Yeah.
being kind of crapped on. It's interesting, right?
Oh, it's that intrinsic motivation, and those factors are everything, right? So I think you can get engagement, and I think that's like fun and engagement are interesting, like because you can have fun and it's not engaging, really.
Yeah.
Engagement means like you're really immersed in the practice, and usually engagement does result in some laughs and some having a good time, but you're into it. It's like the hour goes by and like feels like 5 minutes. That's kind of what I go for with, especially the younger kids. I want it to be engaging, and I want them to feel like they're like, what, it's over, what's going on, like, um, and when you have engagement and problem solving, I think that's where you can slip in the challenge. And with young kids especially, like, you don't want to, the challenge threshold can't be too high where it's they're completely like, oh, I can't do it. But to your point, there's got to be, you got to push them towards that line. But I think especially with young kids, it has to circle back to them succeeding a little bit, and that's where practice assigned and things of that nature are so important.
Yeah. Well, I forget what study it was. You've probably read it, where they talk about like high achievers, and how high achievers, there can't just be the pleasurable fun stuff. Like there has to
Yeah.
be like a little bit of a challenge for them, or else they get bored
Mhm.
very easily.
Yeah.
And so have you seen that study or read that study? I can't
I
remember.
have not. I feel like we've talked about it though, so I'll have to get my hands on that.
Yeah, I'll try to look for it too. But yeah, like all high achievers, like a big part of their improvement is just they relish that challenge. They almost relish the
Yeah.
failure and I have to beat this. I have to get better. And it's yeah, it can't all be fun and games. We talk about that a lot, and it's really important. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day too, especially if you have kids that really want it,
Yeah.
finding a way to challenge them is really important too.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No question.
Okay, cool. All right, next question I have here. I guess this kind of goes a little bit along with it, but we've kind of talked about things from like, age appropriate level, in a
Mhm.
sense. And I've asked you some questions, about some of the younger players that you worked with versus some of the older players that you might work with. If you, as a development coach, do a lot of skill work, do a lot of things, maybe if there's any advice that you can give a coach for kids that are younger, maybe let's talk about mites, squirts,
Yeah.
maybe peewees, and then one piece of advice that you would give to a youth coach that's more like bantam, midget, a little bit older.
Mhm.
Like what would the most important piece of advice you would have for those people?
Yeah, I think for the mite and squirt age, you know, make it fun, number one, and then have decisions be a part of your practice, your drill design. Don't put kids into, you know, line one passes to line two to line three. Give them interactions with opponents. Um, I'm lucky I've been able to have some nice conversations with some of the guys, USA Hockey and Ken Martell specifically. And they're doing some amazing things as far as, how can we teach IQ? How can we prepare players to have that ability to read opponents and read space and have those habits kind of ingrained from a really young age of scanning, and there's some really great stuff they're doing. So I would just to those age groups, let them play one-on-one, play one-on-one, see if they can get it off the other guy, see if they can read and anticipate all those little, we talk about like hockey sense, like it's about reading opponents in some cases, and then situational, probabilities and things of that nature. But if you can read people really well, right, you're going to be able to read that poke check coming. You're going to be able to read when to stick lift. You're going to some of those things you're kind of going to learn implicitly versus, okay, now we're stick handling for, in lines, and then we're going to pass in lines. I think allow it to be a little bit more dynamic, and messy, maybe isn't the right word, but to where the kids are having to make decisions and play off each other versus these kind of rote military sort of drilling.
Cool, cool. And then how about at the older ages?
At the older ages, I think you got to, um, I, the higher you go up, I think the more you got to be specific about what they need, right? And at the younger ages, obviously, they got to learn a lot, right? So you just got to give them opportunities in a lot of different environments. But at the midget, did you say midget?
Yeah, like
Coach, sorry,
bantam, midget. Yeah, yeah.
and a midget. I think now it's let's watch some film. Let's figure out where Jack or Johnny or Teddy, like where do they, like what are they missing right now that's going to stop them from being able to be productive this year and then long term. And if you have that sort of individual development mindset within the team setting, I think it's going to set you up for winning. I think you'll win more games in the long term. It might not be that first year, but if you have 2 years with a team, that second year is really going to be fruitful, and you're going to help them move on. I think what happens is, sometimes we get caught up in, the results, the very near results versus that long term thought process around what is going to help a player in our club. If they really love it and they're willing to put the work in, what's stopping them from maybe making that next level? How can we get them to improve in those areas?
Yeah, I like that. I feel like you talk about environment in our culture too. Just as a hockey director, I'm really kind of recognizing this where it's almost like people have made youth hockey into we need to win the first tournament rather than the last tournament. And what I mean
Hmm.
by that is we need to make sure we have the best team, and it's become like a recruiting game rather
Yeah.
than the focus on the betterment of of the kids. And at the end of the day, like when you're playing with and against and competing against the best players in practice, that's always a good thing as well.
Yeah.
So there is merit to having really good players on your team to make the kids
Oh
better.
yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like that is not at least like when I talk to kids, especially and parents, especially at the older levels, like I would rather them say that where it's like I just like the talent of the team is really important because of it challenges my kid to get better. But that's not the conversation I'm having. The conversation
Yeah.
I'm having is I need my kid to be on the most talented team so the scouts will come see them play and they'll get exposure because my team
Yeah.
wins. Right? So yes, there 100% is merit to having the best players on your team and
Yeah.
competing that way. But I just like, I wish the conversation was the first one and not the second one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Do you see
And I
that
think,
too?
oh yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
probably even
And
at
I
the
think that
youngest levels.
seriously, yeah, and I think that's where all these parents are smart people, very smart people, and most of them are very successful people. So I think again, it goes back to let's get some of this information in front of them, and I think they're going to make different decisions in some cases,
Yeah,
or be more mindful of like what their you know what their thought process is and what they're valuing, and then their kids then taking those values, right?
sure.
How can you get better? How are you going to, what can we do to help you improve? How can we support you versus, maybe worried about making that top, that all-star team. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Okay, we got two more questions. And this one actually kind of goes with the beginning of the last question. And that is, can you teach hockey sense? I feel like that's the $1,000,000 question that a lot of people are wanting to figure out. Can you teach hockey sense? And if yes, how?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to, sit on my soapbox and be like, yeah, for 100%, you can, you know, everything we do is with that intelligence. When we look at like the type of player, we write down exactly, like what do we look for and what do we want to help develop in a player, and intelligence is number one. Game sense, situational understanding, and reading opponents. So a lot of our practice design is with those things in mind, especially with younger players. So we've seen kids become a lot more fluent and sensitive to, how to protect the puck, when to make a move, you know, as they're coming up the ice, scanning behind them so they know where support is. So when we talk about like hockey sense and decision making, I think you can improve those things. In my opinion, does that mean you're going to be like Patrick Kane? I don't know, but I think we should give it a chance, and that's what some of the ADM and some of the things that Ken and Dan Jablonic and some of the people at USA Hockey at younger ages, we need the kids to interact and be sensitive to what is around them. Too many kids today don't play other sports, and they don't have interactions in proprioception, which is like the feel for where people are around you. So you get players that are like this versus players that are like this, or feeling where people are. If you watch like a Pedersen or a Kaner or an Aho or any of these Kucherov, they are so sensitive to where people are around them. And it's not always a scan. Sometimes it's just a feel. But the way you develop that is from being in situations where you have to deal with that around you. If you're doing drills and lines where you don't go against anybody, and you're never in congested areas with the puck where you have to be aware of what's going on. I'm making a lot of like
We
side
should
fakes
put
here.
like a musical background to this part, like a little Shakira or something.
Yeah, I'm really getting my shoulders going here. If they're never, if you're never in those situations, and how are we expecting the kids to be able to, in a 5-on-5 game, be aware of what's behind them? I think it's just unfair to the kids. I don't, so that's where like at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like you need to be able to, work in a phone booth and have a lot of pressure from players and deal with it and lose the puck, get it back, lose it again, learn to read what people are going to try to do to get the puck from you. And that's where I think some people, again, I certainly respect and understand the use of cones and just doing moves to do moves without pressure. And there's a time and place for sure. But I think if we can move towards a little bit more, reading off of people, and that's the real skill. Is the technique is one thing, and a lot of people are great technical, but they can't apply the technique in context. So if we can't provide the context, I think we're kind of limiting what our players are going to be able to do in games and the transference of what we're trying to teach them from a technique perspective. So those are things I think I kind of talked for in circles here, but I think getting back to your question, those are things that enhance hockey sense.
Yeah.
Does it make you?
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I feel like, I think back to like when I was a player, and I think back to even some of the conversations I've had with a lot of high level players. And sometimes you ask them, a lot of times they know exactly what it is, but sometimes it was just like, I felt it. Like
Yeah.
I saw it. And that feel, that proprioception of what you're talking about, it's just like it's not necessarily like a hockey specific, I saw this pattern, blah, 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 blah. It was like, no, I just kind of saw a little bit of a space, or
Yeah.
just read something, and they can't really explain it to you, but it's just like, no, I just made a freaking hockey play. I just did what was natural. And I feel like the more players can do that, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, that's those millisecond decisions that have already been made, and we're already starting to execute before our conscious mind can even catch up, because it's our brains are very impressive. It's like, but you pick those up in little 2-on-2, 1-on-1, um, you know backyard games, basketball, soccer. You pick up those little cues. Okay, that might be my in. And you've had success with it in the past, probably, so now you're conditioned in your brain. You're like, oh, that worked great. And you have those experiences over a long period of time, and then you get to a college level and you don't know how you did it, but that was built up over a long time of experiences of you kind of sensing that someone's right here. Okay, their stick's starting to get up, but I'm out of this now because I've had success with that in the past.
Yeah.
So if we don't put the kids in those situations ever, then how are they going to pick those up? So that's what I've been really spending a lot of time on as well, is like designing things where it's not like you have no choice but to look around. If you don't look around, you're going to run into somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that leads into too, like, one of the things that I really respect in players, and this kind of goes back to being coaching and recruiting even at the college level. And I think it's something that is such an important skill to have to be an elite player. And that's knowing when to show poise and knowing when to give it quick,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, like, you're probably going to have the puck on your stick for less than a second at
Yeah.
most times during a game. And that half a second to a second, or that second to 2 seconds sometimes, to let a play develop or to recognize what's going on around you, that is a hard thing to be very, very elite at. But that's what the elite players are elite at, is having that understanding of when to hold on to it, and then, or when to give it, and then kind of go and understand the situation that you're in. So what you're talking about, I feel like a ton of that, like, I think back, like, I learned a lot of that in basketball. Like, we played basketball at noon every day when I was a coach at Cornell to get a sweat in. And it was so, like, we would always talk about how it translated from basketball to whether you're talking about spacing, whether you're talking about the give and the go, whether you're talking about, like you were talking about, the reading the body cues of people. There's so much that translates from that poise, reading the game, the feel of the game, that you can get from the other sports, and being put in situations where you have to do that in those small areas in hockey.
Yeah.
It's just like, now I'm like thinking as a player and how important that is too.
And I know you had, and I listened to it, I thought it was a great chat with James Marcoux, and
He
the
must have
stuff
been
he did.
unreal at that, huh? Like,
He was
elite.
an unbelievable player. Like, he, but every move he made had a purpose, and the timing of it was impeccable. Like me, I'd be coming down doing like 7 stick handles and no one has moved yet. Everything he did, everything he did was like, he understood how to move people. He understood when to put on the brakes. Like, he just read people so well. And I'm lucky I consulted with him a lot, like while I was coaching the squirts and peewees the last couple of years. And, I took his advice of just, let's play a lot of one-on-one. Let's do a lot of 2v2. And a lot of those kids now are, they're going to be bantam minors now, and they read the body well, and they do some really fun things, and they're still a long ways away, but you can see how his love, for the game, but also his training all the way up really impacted his ability to be an elite player, and he certainly was.
Yeah, yeah, and it's making me think about you. You posted a video, it was like a highlight clip of Peter Forsberg the other day, and I feel like there's
Yeah.
probably, well, I don't know how many people were better than him at all the stuff that we're talking about right now. It's he was a special player.
Yeah, off the charts. He's my favorite player.
Is he?
Yeah, like as a kid. Yeah, he was incredible. So good.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, last one here. Ready to move on? Last one?
Yep.
That was good stuff. All right. So you are a skill development coach. You do a lot of small group work. You do a lot of individual work with players. A lot of parents are trying to help their kid get better. And part of that is, getting them to people like you, who can help them on a more individual basis than maybe their youth coach can. If you were going to give advice to parents who are looking to hire somebody to work on their kid's individual game, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would say, certainly that your player can get a lot out of it. And, to do your research on what type of person that coach is, and what kind of impact, not just on the ice, but off the ice, the coach will have. Because it's, one of the fun things for me has been like, I've worked with some people for like 7 years, and now they're, young adults, and it's fun to see how they've developed as people too. And that's a big part of this as well. And if the coach can impact your player that way, that's going to help them, overall. The hockey specific stuff, I think, don't get overly consumed with one-on-one work. I think there's times for that, where you can really dig into technical stuff. And but small groups, I think, are great, because it allows you to get those hockey interactions that we talked about. It allows you to, be able to go against peers, or potentially older players, and test some of this stuff out and get a lot of reps of it too. So I think those are, if you're going to be need some technical work, things that aren't functional, and you really need to get some, advance some of those, the one-on-one's great, but leaning towards small groups, I think, is always great, because there's just so much more you can do.
Awesome. I love it, man. Well, thanks for taking some time, talk some hockey. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's fun for me too. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Thanks.
See ya.
Bye-bye.